So once again, it is time to review a book. Today, I'm here to review Magnus Chase, A Sword of Summer by Rick Riordan. Hello everyone, it is Samantha. I hope you guys are having a fabulous day. I am here to do another book review. It seems like it's been a while since I filmed one, so I'm here to rectify that today. And as I said in the intro, I'm here today to review Rick Riordan's A Sword of Summer, the first book in the Magnus Chase series. So let us get started with my spoiler-free review. So The Sword of Summer is the first book in Rick Riordan's new Magnus Chase book series that follows the Norse gods and their half-blood children. The book follows Magnus Chase, who is a 16-year-old orphaned runaway. Following his mother's mysterious death 2 years prior, Magnus has been living by himself on the streets, homeless and orphaned, trying to evade the law because she died under mysterious circumstances and he's afraid that they might link him to the murder. So he has been living on the streets, but he's been protected by two homeless guys, Blitz and Hearth, who are kind of like his mother and father figures out on the streets. Soon after the story opens, Magnus is actually awakened by Blitz, who is informing him that some people are going around with his picture on posters, handing them out, trying to look for him. Magnus ends up taking off and soon encounters his cousin Annabeth and her father and overhears them talking about him and how his other estranged uncle has been looking for him. So curious as to why his estranged uncle that nobody's gotten along with in the family has been looking for him, Magnus decides to go to his home and snoop around and see what he can find out. Unfortunately, he ends up encountering his uncle there, and his uncle ends up coercing him to follow him to the pier, where he wants Magnus to retrieve a lost sword, because he has informed Magnus that he is in fact the son of Frey, one of the Norse gods, and that this sword is his inheritance. It is an ancient Viking sword sitting in the bay in Boston. Magnus does in fact retrieve the sword and is soon attacked by the fire giant Surt. Unfortunately, Magnus ends up being killed by Surt and loses the sword in the bay, but upon his death, Magnus actually arrives at Valhalla, which is basically the world of the lost heroes. All of the heroes who have fought for the Norsemen, the Norse gods, end up here if they have died a heroic death, where they can live in the afterlife, preparing to fight for doomsday. But soon after entering Valhalla and learning more about himself and his past and his inheritance, he ends up fleeing because he needs to set out on his own quest, along with Blitz and Hearth and Sam, the young girl who ends up bringing him to Valhalla. So together they take off to try and retrieve the sword that he ended up losing again, his inheritance, before it falls in enemy hands and is used to bring about doomsday. So this is the basic plot of the Magnus Chase series. It was definitely a lot of fun. I really enjoyed this one just as much as his Percy Jackson books, if not a little bit more. I thought that Magnus Chase's humor was on point. He's definitely a little bit more cutting than Percy, a little more harsh, but he's absolutely hilarious. I totally appreciate his sarcasm. I would also say that this is one of the more grown up of Rick Riordan's YA novels. It was really enjoyable. I just found the humor to be so entertaining, and the topics that were addressed were done really, really well. I also like that Rick Riordan continues to have a diverse cast of characters in this series as well. He introduces Hearth, who is a deaf and mute character and uses American Sign Language to communicate. He also introduces Sam, who is a young Muslim girl, into the story, which I thought was fantastic. I just really like that Rick Riordan takes the time to introduce a diverse cast of characters, particularly since these are books that are geared towards a younger audience, and I think it does a lot to help younger kids read characters that they can relate to and learn more about people who are different than them and how that's okay, and you should always accept people who are different than you. I think that's something that's really fantastic about Rick Riordan's books and definitely carries over into his new Magnus Chase series. I also like some of these subtle connections between this series as well as the Heroes of Olympus series. There's no spoilers for the Percy Jackson books, but there's definitely some intertwining things that you'll see when you start to read it. So I'm curious to see if some of the characters in the Percy Jackson books will be in the series more, and how the Norse gods and the Greek gods and Roman gods are all connected. I think that's something I'm hoping he will address in the future books. I just want to know if they know about each other. I mean, I don't know. It seems kind of interesting that there's multiple sets of gods and set in this world, so that's something that I'm hoping he'll address in the future books. I also liked his twist on the gods in this one as well, such as Thor and Loki and all the other ones we're familiar with from the Marvel superhero universe. So that was something else that I really enjoyed. Though a lot of it was a little bit too similar to the Percy Jackson books. Like, I think the plot, the way it was set up, the way the story unfolds is definitely very, very similar to the Percy Jackson books, and even some of the gods' personalities are very similar. And I do wish that he would kind of mix up the stories a little bit, kind of add totally new twists to the story that aren't completely like the Percy Jackson books. Like, it would have been nice if Magnus was a little bit different than Percy in terms of his sense of humor and kind of how he's a little bit of like that bad boy, badass, smart ass kind of a character. It would have been nice to kind of mix it up a little bit. But it wasn't bad, and it wasn't too similar to the Percy Jackson books that I found it totally distracting, but it was something that I kind of made me give it a little bit of a lower rating, just how similar the two stories were in terms of character personality, not in plot, just FYI. I also felt that the book actually dragged a little bit in the middle. There was probably about 150 pages in, I started to lose a little bit of interest. It does end up picking up again in another 100 pages or so, but there was that spot kind of in the middle where the story kind of dragged, so I think that the story could have been cut a little bit short. I think there were some things that didn't have to be rehashed as much as they were. But other than that, I really, really enjoyed this book. I thought it was just perfect. I really, really love Rick Riordan's writing. It makes me smile. I find it to be a lot of fun, and I think that he's just created a really, really great and fascinating world, and I can't wait to read more in this series. I think I do actually like this one better than the Percy Jackson books, and I think it's definitely a little more adult in its humor, and it's something that anybody of any age can enjoy. Alright guys, that is it for my spoiler-free review of Magnus Chase, The Sword of Summer. You can let me know what you thought of this book series and how you think it stacks up against the Percy Jackson books. Thank you guys so much for watching, and until next time, happy reading. Bye!